All right, welcome back, everybody, to another edition of, I think we were calling it CITV, Cats Illustrated Television. It's really a Zoom conference call with myself, Justin Rowland, the publisher of Cats Illustrated, and my esteemed and excellent colleagues, Jeff Drummond, managing editor, staff writers, David Sisk, and Travis Graff. And I apologize that it's been a little while since we had our first episode, which we got some really good feedback on, but that means there's a lot for us to talk about. So I just start things right off with probably the biggest topic that's gone down for football or basketball since that first episode, and that is news that Wake Forest big man, 7-footer Olivier Sarr is going to be transferring to Kentucky. Definitely took the sting away from missing Matt Harms. A lot of people have said, and probably rightly, that it was a blessing in disguise then to miss out on Harms. And we'll just go down the line and kind of get your take as you've been able to reflect on it. What you think it means for Kentucky, what you think about him as a player. David, Olivier Sarr, how much does he change your priors when you think about next year's Kentucky basketball team or this season's Kentucky basketball team?
Well, to take the words from John Calipari, any team that doesn't have back to the bucket post play is a pretender. And those are his words, not mine. So I think it takes them from being probably ranked somewhere around 15 or 20. If they can get him eligible, they're a top 5 team. They really don't have any holes in starting lineup. He's Calipari's kind of player. He can fit him into the system that he likes to do. So, the pros are just out the roof. I mean, there's no negative to it if he's eligible.
Yeah, it's amazing. We're used to talking about big-time 5-star high school additions for Kentucky, and now we're talking about huge transfer additions, which in this case is like, I look at it as like getting a top 5 player. You're going to have him for 1 year. He's going to be an all-conference caliber player. That seems to be what Olivier Sarr is going to be. He was a third-team All-ACC selection last year, I think, 13, 14, 8 or 9 boards. Not the shot blocker per minute, per 40 that Harms was. But Travis, how big is this addition for UK?
I think it's a huge addition. And like you were talking about with Harms, I think a lot of people, including myself, tried to make him be a fit more than he actually was a fit for Kentucky because he was the best big man on the market at that time. I think that his strengths, though, wouldn't have fit Kentucky as well as Olivier Sarr's do. Olivier Sarr had a couple of 30-point, 13 rebound outings, 20-point, 17 rebound outing. And like you said, he's 7 foot, but he doesn't block as many shots as Harms does. The 7 foot's kind of misleading. You think that he would block a lot more shots. He only averages like 1 block per game, I believe. And he's a guy that you can throw it down to in the post and he can go get you a bucket. I don't think Harms would have been able to do that.
Yeah, just looking at synergy data as I was going through things a couple of weeks ago, he's only 3% of his points. 3% of his offense came pulled away on jump shots. This is a very much a throwback, traditional back-to-the-basket scorer. I want to say 75% of his offense came on post-ups or putbacks. And beyond that, what's really encouraging, he was one of the best big men in the country playing the pick and roll, just setting the screen and then flowing to the basket and then catching a lob. And he was very good doing that. He's limited defensively. He didn't grade out nearly as well defensively as some of the top big men in the country. But, he had a lot of questions. And, Jeff, what was your initial take and how has he changed your thinking?
Well, I'll piggyback off what you just said about defense, and I'll make a prediction. I think you'll see him take a big step forward playing for a coach that demands it and expects it. I don't know much about what, Manning's system was like at Wake, but I do know, having been around Cal for a long time, he's going to get the best out of that guy's defensive ability this season. It may even help him, bolster his stock a little bit by showing that's part of his game that really hasn't been showcased yet. But when you look at it big picture, especially compared to losing out on Harms, I think you get a guy that fits in just much better and almost steps right into Nick Richards' role in a lot of ways, size-wise, style-wise. They do some things different, but it's a good fit for the surrounding talent. and for Sarr, it's going to be a good fit for him.
Yeah, this guy, I mean, he was like 20 points, 10 rebounds a game, something like that over Wake Forest last 5 games, and that was against some quality teams. He had a 30-point, 17-rebound game in there. You know, I'm not knocking Richards. We don't have to compare them. I'm not sure he's going to be the defender that Richards was, but I think offensively he's probably got a higher ceiling than Richards did. I mean, if you could have told John Calipari you're going to get Nick Richards back for another year just in terms of impact, he would have been ecstatic. And that seems to be what Sarr essentially in terms of impact is going to be. I'll ask this and throw it out there for anybody who wants to answer. Is this John Calipari's best transfer in recent memory? Would you rank him ahead of Reed Travis? I think people would expect him to be more than Nate Sestina, all due respect, but between Sarr and Travis in particular, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think he's the best. I think he's better than Reed Travis, just based off of, like you said, he put up numbers in a crappy offensive system against the best competition and in the best basketball conference in the country. And while I talked about he wasn't a great shot blocker, Reed Travis wasn't a great shot blocker either, but Sarr is able to alter more shots at 7 foot than Reed Travis, who's probably closer to 6'8", 6'9". And I think I think Sarr is going to be able to get up and down the floor better than Reed Travis did. And I think he's going to be more consistent because Reed Travis, he was a great leader, great player in his own right, but he got blocked at the rim more than a lot of people expected whenever he got to Kentucky. So I think that Sarr is going to have a little bit of a bigger impact than him.
And you have to look at the need too. Do you want 7 foot or do you want 6'8", 250? You know, Travis talked about the frame and just what the need is there. The 7-footer is always going to be more of a desire. And then, like I said, then you get into the need. So I agree with Travis 100%.
Front court now, we're looking at Sarr, Jackson, Ware, Fletcher. I might be missing somebody, but you guys, obviously this elevates Kentucky to having probably, you know, one of the better front courts I would imagine in college basketball. You know, you're taking Sarr, who, you know, probably could have contended to be like a first-team all-conference player in just about any league this year, you would imagine, given his trajectory, one of the most improved players in the country last year. It's not as much pressure on somebody like Jackson, I think, to come in and to be great right away. And David, I'll stick with you really quickly. You've been really high on Jackson. I think you've kind of been one of those people, as we were talking about the harms, you know, as everybody was panicking, is Kentucky going to have a true big? You've never veered away from saying Jackson is being overlooked. Just overall, what do you think about the front court now?
Well, I understand, like you said, that a player like Sarr would take the pressure off Isaiah. And I'll be honest with you, if you go through the first half of the year and that's what you're depending on, then there's some reason to be nervous. But I want to see Isaiah Jackson and Lance Ware just get reps. And, you know, if you keep bringing in guys and you still have people out there that they want to make post additions. And I'm like, gosh, you got to give the guys, you know, an opportunity. Calipari built this thing over elite freshmen, and Isaiah Jackson's certainly elite freshman. Lance Ware is. So, yeah, I like – with Sarr there, I like the backcourt. I think without him, if he's not eligible, the team gets smaller, and then you probably look at from Jackson going from a backup 5 or maybe even 4 to a pure 5. So, you know, if Sarr doesn't play, it could change the whole look, and you're a lot more perimeter oriented.
Jeff, since the Sarr news, we've had DeAndre Williams decide to go elsewhere. We were thinking, you know, after the Sarr edition, it seems like that would have been gravy. They've already got, 10, 11 guys, and most of them could be rotation players. And the guy's handler, DeAndre Williams' handler, kind of made some comments that kind of rubbed some people the wrong way. And I know David and Travis, you guys have talked about this. I want to say on Sources Say, I could be wrong, but just comments to the effect of he didn't like that Calipari was talking to the kid instead of going through him. Jeff, did they dodge a bullet? Can we say that they dodged a bullet with him?
Well, I don't know much about him personally, but it certainly feels that way from what we've read. so far. I mean, I don't know what is gained by going to the media and kind of pounding your chest about that anyway. I mean, it's certainly not going to help you if there's another guy down the line that maybe needs your help and your connections. And perhaps Kentucky says, no thanks then. So I didn't understand why such a big deal was made out of it. But knowing the way Cal likes to run his program, he's always going to be direct. And usually that's with the mother and the father and the kid. And, anyone else who's trying to be part of that equation, Cal typically doesn't like to have high involvement there. So, it's just my thought that it probably worked out for the best, especially when you combine that with the little tidbits we were hearing about how he wanted a certain number of shots and that type of thing, which could have gotten in the way of, some of these other guys developing their games this year.
Travis, you agree with that? Did Kentucky dodge a bullet with DeAndre?
Yeah, I think so. I think that Cal probably took a step back and looked at the situation and thought, this kid is 24 years old. Why does he need a handler in the first place? He's not a true recruit. I can just talk to him. I don't know why. And then whenever people like David and other sources of basketball recruiting talked to him and said, we're asking him questions, it seemed like like Jeff said, he's more puffing out his chest and being like, hey, this is my player, than talking about the player. And David told me that he seemed behind the scenes like real giddy, like a schoolgirl, to just like talk to Calipari and big name coaches.
It didn't seem like he was coming from, like, I don't know how to say it, other than he didn't have an inner authority. It seemed like he was trying a little bit too hard to prove something. And for a kid to allow somebody at that age to, I guess I'm less sympathetic when he's not a kid, and he's allowing somebody to have that place. I get you're trying to elevate yourself to a platform beyond Evansville. You might not have the connections or the wherewithal or the understanding of how it works, but that was interesting. I kind of stepped in it, comparing DeAndre to Keon. I'm not going to get into all that. Here's all I would say about him. DeAndre is a very, very gifted offensive player. I mean, not many players in the country can score as many ways as he can. Adjust for the level of competition, I don't know. I didn't know whether Keon had a 37-point, 10-rebound game in him. And I think DeAndre did that against Miami of Ohio. Off the court stuff aside, Kentucky has Keon. They don't have DeAndre. And Keon can take a big step forward this year. And I think the consensus that people came to on the board was taking a P.J. Washington type step forward this year doesn't necessarily mean he's going to put up sophomore P.J. numbers. It just means he might just be the fourth scorer on this team, but he's going to be a good fourth option on this team. David, do you think Keon is poised for a much better, more consistent role this season?
Absolutely. And, you normally see it with sophomores anyway, because it just seems to me like John Calipari, the hook's not as quick with sophomores as it is with freshmen. Right. We saw that with Emmanuel Quickly. I mean, all Emmanuel Quickly had to do was not throw it to the wrong guy, to throw it to the wrong guy as a freshman, or go to the wrong side of the floor, and he was yanked. E.J. Montgomery the same way. And you saw it wasn't the way as a sophomore. I think it's the same way with Keon. And it seemed like he had a lot more patience with Keon. So I think we look at Brooks, and I've asked Travis this, could he at least put up E.J. Montgomery type numbers where he's 8-5, 7-5, 8-5. And I think we both agree that he can do that.
One thing that I really liked about last season towards the end of the Florida game, where Cal was forced to trust Keon. It did not have any other options, and how Keon stepped up and performed in that, comeback victory. I think he earned a lot of trust there, and I think that's something he could really take and build on that momentum going into next season.
And if you'll remember, at the end of that game, when they were down on the very last possession, he put Keon on the block, and that's where he went with it. That was his number one option when EJ got to put back dunk.
He's a fantastic player down the stretch in that game. He really was, and they needed it because Hagens was home. I want to say Quickly was fouled out, wasn't he? And
he fouled out about 8 minutes left.
Yeah,
it was double digits.
It was Keon Brooks and Tyrese Maxey stepping up, and I think Richard's got a little more going. But he's shown flashes, maybe not the kind of flashes that Washington showed down the stretch in his freshman season. But that, PJ had to be the guy on that next team, and Keon doesn't have to be the guy on this year's team. And if we're talking about, maybe he can, have an EJ Montgomery kind of impact, and maybe Sarr is Nick Richards. I mean, if you're taking last year's front court and you're surrounding it with a couple of top 5, top 10 players and a much deeper team, this year's team was a contender. I think this next team certainly has the potential to be a contender. I did want to touch on UK Michigan getting pushed back a couple of years, the London game. That for me begs the question, what do you guys think about Kentucky's schedule and scheduling philosophy in general under John Calipari? And is there a team that you would like to see Kentucky play more regularly, or at least maybe set up a series with? Travis, we'll start with you.
Well, the obvious answer is going to be Indiana. I think that's going to be everybody's answer, but I don't see that happening. For me personally,
you'll have half the people will agree with you, and half the people will want to kill you for saying that.
I see it both sides. I see it. I understand it both ways. But for me personally, I'd like to see Kentucky versus Memphis, Calipari versus Memphis, Calipari versus Penny. I'm rooting for that Kentucky-Memphis matchup.
You mentioned that on social media. I think you said in terms of like to slam the final nail in the coffin, or to shut him up finally once and for all.
Yeah, because honestly, at the end of the day, I think Coach Roy, DeAndre Williams' mentor, I think that Penny is using him as a mouthpiece in some ways to I think that was kind of construed from Penny. And I think that Penny's always been barking since he's come into the college ranks, and he hasn't really beaten anybody to really prove it. And then there's just a lot of animosity between Calipari and Memphis, and Memphis fans are like really, really loud on social media. So I think it would be a fun matchup because UK fans are super loud as well.
I guess they're the second loudest fan base in their state after only Big Orange Twitter, which nobody wants to stir. Jeff, any team you would like to see Kentucky play on a more regular basis, or maybe set up a series with at some point?
Well, I would obviously, in my age bracket, I would go to the Indiana series as well, knowing that that's probably not going to happen unless the IU folks thaw a little bit on the thought of neutral courts or some kind of arrangement there. So I'm not getting my hopes up that will change anytime soon. But I like the Memphis suggestion is a good one too. Although I wonder if there would be still a little bit too much venom and poison, surrounding that one that Cal would be a little bit uncomfortable with. So I basically go to any Power 5 team that has a good program consistent from year to year that comes into Rupp Arena, and then Kentucky returns the trip. That's the kind of thing I'm interested in. I've really gotten tired of the neutral court deals and that sort of thing. I think the fans have really lost out on how special it was to have big-time top 25 teams come into Rupp and what kind of atmosphere that was.
Arizona would be fun. Arizona would be fun. There's just not a lot of teams out there that year in, year out you can bank on them being in there. I agree with you guys on Indiana. I grew up in North Carolina, and I firmly believe Kentucky, North Carolina matchups, those teams bring out the best in each other. It's the best game, one of the best games in college basketball every time those two teams play, especially under John Calipari. And they play in the Classic now, the CBS Classic, but that's once every 3 years.
Would you guys bring back the UK North Carolina series in exchange for giving up the CBS Sports Classic?
Absolutely. Yeah.
In a heartbeat. Yeah.
I agree.
Much more value in that than what Kentucky. There's really the Champions Classic has a lot of buzz around it. The rotation of those teams, I think, still carries a lot of weight, but you don't get that same feel from the fan base when it comes to the CBS Sports Classic. It's like it's another game.
It's just crazy to me every time the memories from the last decade of UK UNC games and the number of titles these teams have won over the last 30 years. I mean, it's just crazy. They don't play more often. They don't back down. They play, even if Kentucky's more of a grinded out team, these teams are up and down the court against each other, and they're taking it personally. David, anybody you'd like to see Kentucky take on?
I remember when I was a teenager, younger than that, they used to play Notre Dame a lot.
Yeah.
And
They laid it on Digger a bunch of times. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And Digger, I didn't know, and I don't know the backstory. If anybody knows, put it in the House of Blue. But I listened to the Joe B. Hall podcast with Oscar Combs, and those were great. And they asked him about different coaches, and they said, Digger, tell us about Digger Phelps. And he said, I dare not say anything about him. And I'd like to know exactly what the feud is there. But one reason I say Notre Dame or Purdue, I think it'd be great to play those teams. You're playing a border state with Indiana. You're playing somebody besides the Hoosiers. You just probably spot their fan base pretty good. If you put Purdue home and away, you say, okay, the first year we're going to go to Purdue and play, I think Indiana fans would lose their mind.
I didn't understand the opposition to Indiana until recently. Somebody on Twitter pointed out, it's like, I don't remember exactly what they said, but they said, what if you wrote, for every 10 stories that you wrote as a sports writer, let's say one, you just totally missed the mark. And every time you miss the mark, somebody gets in your face and just mocks you and is just completely relentless and classless. So that's kind of how they felt about Indiana. It's like, even if you go 9-1 against them, the way they act when they win the one time is so insufferable that it's just not worth the risk. And I related to that when they said that, but I would like to see the series come back as well.
Look, Kentucky fans, though, tend to dismiss those dozen or so times that they beat the crap out of Indiana. It's just that one, and that kind of sums up Kentucky basketball in a nutshell. You're expected to win every game, and the one time you don't, or the occasional time that you don't, is always remembered a lot more than those games you did win.
That's for sure. Yeah, Kentucky. That's one of the great ironies. I don't know if irony is the right word, but the losses from history definitely, people stew over them a lot more than they spend time talking about the wins. Which from the outside, it looks like you're spoiled, and because you're spoiled. But that's the great thing about being a Kentucky fan. I did want to get to the NCAA. I guess I've been a little bit unplugged today. We're recording on Thursday early evening. The NCAA is going to let some athletes for some sports come back in June to start training for the season. I guess that means we're probably going to have a college football season, guys. We can't say for sure, but how do you see things going? Like, how do you see things playing out from here? It's a situation in flux, so obviously these aren't hard and fast predictions we're going to hold you to. But Jeff, what do you think we're trending towards?
It still feels like a day-to-day, week-to-week type deal for me. But I like the fact that right now we've got to the point where there's a little bit of optimism going for the first time, and the feel that maybe we can get a plan together to make it work. Because as of about a month ago, it didn't. There was a lot of questions about whether we'd have any football in the fall at all. You know, it may have even been a season totally moved into the springtime. So I do like the fact that there's enough optimism to where they can get these planning stages in place. And then I'm sure they'll leave it open-ended so that, you know, if we get like a second occurrence of some of it peaking in some regions and some areas, they can make some adjustments. That's going to be the biggest thing, I think, is they're going to have to be able to make changes on the fly if situations arise where a team or a conference starts encountering, you know, a lot of problems with it.
Yeah, absolutely. People are going to have to be flexible. Travis, what are you thinking things are trending towards?
I definitely think there's more positive vibes with it over the past couple of weeks than it was a month ago. I think it seems like a more realistic option. And there's been a couple of people, I think South Carolina was talking about it earlier. Time is on the university's side with this. They still got quite a bit of time in the way that there's positive trajectories with all this. I think that there's a good possibility.
David, football, basketball thoughts, just in general. What do you think about the NCAA allowing this? And you feel like it feels to me like I felt good about it, and then I didn't feel good about it, and now I kind of feel good about it again. How do you feel?
I think as far as letting them on campus, I think it's probably best for the athletes. And I've heard this said quite a bit. College coaches feel like the best controlled environment that they can have a player in, their safest environment's on campus, because it's going to be supervised. It's already thought out, and you know, they've got the means to keep these kids safe. Now, I think once the season starts or you get into practice, look, there's going to be a player catch COVID-19. I mean, I would bet $1 million against a Pop-Tart that's going to happen. But what happened, it appears to me, though, that as I kind of watch shows and Paul Feinbaum, like every afternoon, is really educational on this, but it just appears to me like more and more every day they're talking about, hey, we know it's going to happen, but we're going to go ahead and this is what we're thinking about if it does. I know they don't have a plan together, but it's not like the panic surrounding it. I forget which SEC school it was today, but the AD said that they thought maybe they could put in 25 or 30,000 fans and be able to space them out. So, it's even going, even more where they're looking at doing it and doing it with more inclusion.
Heard a pretty good joke along those lines earlier today. Somebody said if they set a percentage of seats that you're allowed to fill, then some places like Alabama and LSU are going to start building a lot of temporary seating to add to that percentage. You're going to have 200,000 seats here before long.
Yeah, there won't be any attendance change for Miami this football season, but
they won't at Bryant-Denny because they're doing all the construction workers called it this week. Did you see that?
Oh yeah.
Hell, Vandy might have an upgrade in the amount of people that show up to their game.
Yeah, well, Kentucky goes to Florida this year. Kentucky goes to Tennessee. Kentucky goes to Auburn. If there were ever a year for Kentucky to be playing in half, a third, a fourth full stadiums at these places, this is the time for it to happen. So it'll be interesting to see how that affects road trips, things like that. Travis, David, Jeff, thank you guys for joining us. Guys, thanks for listening, for watching. Thanks for being a member. We still got a 60-day free trial going on. Go to the front page. You can find that at catsillustrated.com. Hope you join our community. Many people have used that to sign up. Hope you are staying safe. Hope your loved ones are safe. Please continue to stay safe, observe social distancing, all that good stuff. And we will talk to you guys again. We'll do it again very soon. Thanks a lot.